Last episode, Greenfield reached an important milestone. The town became completely self-sustaining without taking any loans. We now have a population of 179 and more than 5,600 coins in the treasury. The economy is stable, and the farms are keeping the town fed. Now the real challenge begins. In this episode, we're going to see if we can scale this farming economy and grow Greenfield into a true city. One of the first issues I noticed was that several of the farm rotations had become out of sync. Because the fields were planted at different times in previous seasons, the crop cycles no longer lined up properly. That can cause problems later during harvest. So the first task here is to correct the field rotations and bring the farms back into a consistent schedule. While correcting the farm rotations, I also decide to make an adjustment to the field sizes. With 4 farms now operating in the town, completing the harvest on time could become more difficult as the population grows. To help reduce the workload during harvest season, I begin rebuilding the fields at a smaller size so they can be managed more efficiently. I reduced the field size from 45 meters to 35 meters, cutting the total field workload by roughly 22%. One of the problems I begin running into is that the farms are struggling to finish the harvest on time. With 3 farms earlier in the town's development, this was not an issue. But after expanding to 4 farms, the workload during harvest season begins to grow beyond what the available workers can reliably complete. To help address this, I reduced the field size from 45 meters to 35 meters. This lowers the overall workload and should make it easier for the farms to complete the harvest before the season ends. With the farm issue addressed for the moment, I decide to return to another idea I had tested earlier: fishing. Now that thread production is available, the docks can produce fishing nets, which should allow the fishing industry to function properly. If everything works as expected, fishing could become another food source for the town and potentially scale alongside the farms. Because the fishing docks are located some distance from the main storage areas, I decide to assign a cart to each dock. This should allow the workers to move materials more efficiently and reduce the amount of time spent carrying supplies back and forth. With better logistics in place, the fishing operation should be able to run more smoothly. While placing the cart sheds near the fishing docks, I decide to add a few more around town. Improving transportation across the settlement should help workers move goods more efficiently and reduce the amount of time spent carrying materials by hand. Checking back on the harvest, I noticed that there are very few laborers available to help the farms. It appears that expanding the fishing operation has pulled workers away from the general labor pool. With fewer laborers available during harvest, the farms are beginning to struggle again. To help increase the workforce, it looks like the town will need more housing to grow the population. Even after reducing the field sizes, some of the crops are still being left in the fields at the end of the harvest. This suggests that the problem may not be the field size alone, but the number of available workers during harvest season. To further improve the fishing operation, I place a warehouse near the docks to store salt for the fish drying process. This will shorten the supply route and prevent workers from having to travel long distances just to gather materials. With the warehouse nearby, the drying operation should run more efficiently. I'm still trying to find a scalable industry that can provide steady employment for the town. To help with that, I decide to add several orchards. Orchards require multiple workers and can provide stable jobs for the town's households. In this case, I place 5 orchards, which should help create steady employment as the town continues to grow. To help increase the available workforce, I begin laying out plans for new housing. A larger population should provide more laborers to assist during harvest season and help the farms complete their work on time. At the same time, it's important to keep at least one member of each household in steady employment so families can maintain an income and avoid the risk of leaving town if they run out of money. After spending some time trying to make the farming system scale properly, I decide to simplify the crop production. Wheat requires additional processing through windmills, which also ties up valuable workers. To free up more labor for the farms and other jobs around town, I remove the windmills and stop producing wheat altogether. This allows me to reassign 12 workers to other tasks where they're needed more. From this point forward, I also begin prioritizing men for new jobs and replace some of the women currently working the farms so more households can maintain steady income. At this point, I'm starting to run into a serious problem with the town's economy. Most of the industries I've built so far are seasonal. Farming in particular requires a large number of workers during planting and harvesting. But for the rest of the year, those same workers don't really have much to do. That leaves a lot of people idle, and idle workers are not good for the town's economy. So the next step is to start looking for something that can scale, something that runs year-round instead of only part of the year. One option would be to move toward heavy industry. That approach worked very well in the New Haven series. But I don't want to repeat the same design here. The whole idea behind Greenfield was to build a town focused on agriculture and rural development. Unfortunately, the reality is starting to set in. Farming alone simply doesn't scale very well. It requires a lot of labor, and much of that labor sits idle outside of the harvest season. So I'm going to compromise a little bit and start introducing some new activities that can keep people working year-round. Before I can do that, though, there's another problem I need to solve. Stone. The nearest stone deposits are across the river, and if I want to expand the town, I'm going to need a steady supply of it. That means the next step is building a bridge. But I have to be careful about where I place it. I don't want the bridge interfering with the dock traffic along the river. So the plan is to place the bridge in a position that keeps the shipping lane clear while still giving access to the stone on the other side. And realistically, this won't be the only crossing. As the town grows, I'm probably going to need several bridges to connect both sides of the river. After thinking about it for a while, I decided to try something different. Instead of relying entirely on farming, I'm going to introduce a small production industry into the town. The industry I chose is a distillery. A distillery has a few advantages for a town like this. First, it can run year-round, which means workers won't sit idle during the winter months the way they do with farming. Second, it produces a valuable good that can support another important building later on, the tavern. Right now, the town doesn't have a tavern, but eventually I want to build one to help improve the quality of life for the residents. A tavern needs a steady supply of alcohol, so building the distillery now sets up that supply chain ahead of time. In other words, this is a bit of planning for the future. The distillery will give some of the extra workers a place to stay employed throughout the year, and when the tavern is built later, the town will already have the production needed to support it. So while Greenfield started as a farming town, it's slowly beginning to develop a few small industries that can stabilize the economy. And that's exactly what this town needs right now. There is one more step before the distillery can be built. The building requires bricks. Unfortunately, bricks aren't something that can be bought on the market in Ostriv, and they also can't really be sold as a trade good. That means if I want bricks, I have to produce them myself. So the next building going down will be a brickworks. This is less about creating a permanent industry and more about producing the materials needed for construction. Once the buildings that require bricks are finished, there's a good chance the brickworks will no longer be necessary. In fact, it may end up being demolished later once its job is done. But for now, it's a necessary step. Sometimes in a growing town, you need to create a temporary industry just to unlock the next stage of development. And that's exactly what the brickworks is going to do for Greenfield. It's a short-term solution that will allow the distillery and future expansion to happen. Now, when it comes to building a distillery, location actually matters. The building requires water, so placing it close to a water source makes the most sense. In this case, platform water works just fine. The water doesn't have to be perfectly clean because it will be distilled during production anyway. So instead of worrying about placing it near a well or a water supply system, I can simply position the distillery near the river. That makes construction easier and keeps the layout of the town a little more flexible. It also keeps the industrial side of production slightly separated from the residential areas. So the plan is to place the distillery along the water where access is simple and expansion later will still be possible. Once the bricks are ready, construction can begin and we'll finally have our first true year-round production industry in Greenfield. Once the bridge was completed, the land on the other side of the river was finally accessible. Up until now, those resources were essentially out of reach. But with the crossing in place, I can start taking advantage of what's available over there. The first step is placing a mining cart shed. This building allows workers to collect stone from the surrounding deposits and transport it back into town. Stone is one of those materials that every settlement eventually needs in large quantities. It's used for construction, roads, and a number of important buildings as the town expands. So gaining access to this resource early on is going to help support future development. It also gives a few more workers something productive to do, which continues the goal of reducing idle labor around the town. With the bridge in place and the mining cart shed established, Greenfield now has access to the stone it needs to keep growing. At this point, I want to make something clear. The town treasury isn't really the problem. There is still money available to build and expand. The real challenge here is managing the town itself. As Greenfield grows, the difficulty isn't paying for buildings. It's keeping everyone working and keeping everyone happy. Many of the industries I've built so far are seasonal, especially farming. That means large numbers of workers are needed for part of the year, but during the off-season, those same workers don't always have jobs. Idle workers can quickly become a problem for a growing town. If people don't have steady work, the entire system begins to slow down. So the goal here isn't just to spend money on expansion. The goal is to build industries that keep people employed throughout the year. That's why I've started looking for industries like the distillery and the brickworks. They help stabilize the labor force and make sure the town keeps moving forward. Because in a town like this, growth isn't just about building more houses. It's about building a system that actually works. Another industry that will likely be temporary is the stone mining camp. This map has a limited amount of both stone and limestone available. Once those deposits are gone, they're gone for good. So the stone mining operation is really just there to harvest the resources that are already on the map. It's useful while the town is expanding because stone is needed for roads, buildings, and other infrastructure. But it's not something that will last forever. Eventually, those deposits will run out, and when that happens, the stone industry here will probably disappear. So just like the brickworks, this is more of a resource extraction phase of the town's development rather than a permanent industry. For now, though, it gives workers something productive to do and provides the materials needed to keep Greenfield growing. After making a few adjustments, I added some additional housing and shifted a few workers around. Some positions were eliminated and others were reassigned in an attempt to balance the workforce a little better. But as the year came to an end and December arrived once again, the results were still not ideal. Even with the changes, some of the fields were not fully harvested before winter. That means part of the crop was lost. This is exactly the problem I've been running into with farming on this map. The harvest window is short, and if there aren't enough workers available at the right time, the fields simply don't get cleared before the cold weather sets in. So despite the adjustments, farming is still proving to be difficult to scale. And that reinforces the reason I've been trying to introduce other industries into the town. Greenfield needs year-round work to keep people busy and to stabilize the economy. Otherwise, every winter the town risks losing part of its harvest. At this point, the town has been running for about 12 years. It is now the year 1733, and Greenfield has grown to a population of 252 people. I'm continuing to add a few more houses as the town slowly expands. Financially, the situation looks quite healthy. The treasury now holds about 9,500 coins. So money really isn't the issue. In fact, the town's coffers keep growing year after year. The real challenge is something else entirely. Expansion is happening very slowly, and sometimes it feels like it isn't happening at all. Most of the work here revolves around trying to balance labor, industries, and seasonal farming. And despite all the adjustments I've made, the farms are still losing part of their crops each year. So the next step is to keep experimenting and see if I can figure out what's actually causing that problem. If I can solve that, Greenfield might finally be able to expand at a much faster pace. Even though it isn't strictly required yet, I decided to go ahead and build the tavern. The tavern doesn't directly improve production or expand the economy, but it does serve another important purpose. It helps keep the population happy. As the town grows, morale becomes more important. People want more than just work and food. They also need a little entertainment. That's exactly what the tavern provides. It gives the residents a place to relax and socialize, which helps improve the overall mood of the town. Since the treasury is doing quite well, I'm also considering another experiment. I may try giving everyone a raise. The town currently has more than enough money in the treasury, so increasing wages might help improve happiness even further. Sometimes small adjustments like this can make a noticeable difference in how smoothly a town runs. So we'll see how that plays out and whether it has any impact on the town's development. At this point, I decided to try a different approach to the farming problem. Instead of adding more farms or more workers, I started looking at how labor is being used throughout the year. Fishing normally runs until December, but that keeps a lot of workers busy right when the farms need them the most. So I decided to shorten the fishing season and stop operations in October instead. That way those workers become available just in time for the harvest. I didn't stop there either. I went through several of the other industries and temporarily reduced the number of workers during October and November. The goal is to free up as many laborers as possible during the harvest window. This is really a test to see if labor availability is the reason the fields aren't getting clear before winter. Interestingly, sowing the fields never seems to be the problem. Planting always gets done without any issues. Harvesting, on the other hand, is where things begin to fall apart. So if this adjustment works, it could mean the solution isn't more farms or more housing. It may simply be better workforce timing. Now we just need to wait and see if the fields finally get cleared this year. After watching the farms more closely, I started to notice something important about the harvest cycle. The fields begin harvesting around August, and the process can continue all the way until the beginning of December. That's a fairly long window, but it still requires enough workers to finish the job before winter arrives. So with the changes I made earlier, I'm effectively giving the farms 2 months of extra labor. By reducing workers in other industries during October and November, about 20 additional laborers should now be available to help clear the fields. If the problem really is labor shortages during harvest season, this adjustment should make a noticeable difference. The key will be whether the fields actually get cleared before December arrives. If they do, then the issue wasn't farm capacity at all. It was simply that too many workers were tied up in other industries when the harvest needed them most. So now we wait and see if this experiment finally solves the problem. After watching the farms carefully, I think I've finally figured out what's really causing the harvest losses. Each farm can request up to 20 laborers during harvest season, with 4 farms operating at the same time. That means the system is asking for as many as 80 laborers. The town simply doesn't have that many workers available. So instead of all farms harvesting at once, the laborers get spread out between them. Usually one farm ends up getting most of the workers first, and its fields are harvested quickly. Then the workers gradually move on to the next farm, and then the next. By the time they reach the last farm, the number of available workers is smaller, and the time remaining before winter is very short. That's when crops start getting left behind in the fields. So the problem isn't really the farms themselves. It's the way the labor force is being divided between too many farms at the same time. In practice, running 4 farms can actually make harvesting harder than running 3. With fewer farms, the workers can concentrate their effort and clear the fields much faster. So after 12 years of watching this town grow, the problem may finally have a clear explanation. And now for the good news. With the additional labor force available during the harvest season, the farms finally managed to clear every field. For the first time since the town was founded, The harvest was completed before winter arrived. That's a big milestone for Greenfield. It confirms that the issue wasn't the farms themselves, and it wasn't the amount of land being cultivated. The real problem was simply labor availability during the harvest window. By freeing workers from other industries during October and November, the farms finally had enough help to bring everything in before December. So after 12 years of trial and error, the town has finally managed to achieve a full harvest. It's a small victory, but it's an important one, because it shows that sometimes the solution isn't building more, it's simply managing the workforce more effectively. That will bring this episode of Greenfield to a close. Over the past 12 years, the town has grown to a population of 268 people, and the treasury has continued to expand, reaching 10,186 coins. So money was never really the problem. The real challenge has been managing labor and keeping the town expanding at a steady pace. Along the way, we added bridges to reach new land, opened stone collection across the river, and began introducing small industries like the brickworks and the distillery. A tavern was also built to improve the quality of life for the residents. But the biggest challenge in this episode was farming. For years, some of the crops were being lost when winter arrived. After studying the harvest cycle more closely, I adjusted several industries so workers would become available during October and November. With those additional laborers helping the farms, the fields were finally cleared for the first time. So after 12 years of development, Greenfield has finally achieved a complete harvest. However, one challenge still remains. The town still doesn't have a truly scalable year-round industry, and finding that solution will likely shape the future development of Greenfield. If you enjoyed this episode and want to follow the progress of the town, please consider liking the video, sharing it with others who enjoy city builders, and subscribing to the channel. There's still plenty of work ahead for Greenfield, and I look forward to continuing the journey in the next episode.